Now join the co-creators of Dying for Sex, Liz Meriwether and Kim Rosenstock. So the trailer getting laughs in a big room, that's like, are there better feelings than that as someone who's made a show?
No, it's thank you. Thank God you laughed.
Thank you.
It would have been spiraling.
It's very, very hard not to, I would say. Even if you haven't watched this, you can tell this is a show about female friendship in a lot of ways and a lot of other things. But knowing that you guys met when you were in your 20s, much like these characters in the show we see played by Michelle Williams and Jenny Slate, are we seeing any similarities between your lives and the friendship that's at the heart of the series without all the cancer and sex quest stuff? Share as much of that as you want to.
Let's get into it.
But as friends who made a show about friends, how much real life similarities are we seeing here?
I mean, I think we've just known each other for a very long time. So I do think there's with any long-term friendship, there's just a shorthand. There's a knowledge of who this person is, and
sometimes too much knowledge.
Too much knowledge.
Yeah. With old friends, they can kind of just look at you and see right through you in a way that's kind of scary, and I feel like we have that a little bit.
Yeah, in a beautiful way. I also, I don't know, I feel like I've talked about there was a day on set where I showed up with 3 cups of coffee and 2 giant versions of this and a bunch of coats, and Liz just looked at me and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I feel like I'm the Nikki in this moment." And I don't know. I feel like there are some similarities in terms of that dynamic a little bit, but I think mostly it's just our hope is that this just speaks to all people who have been in long-term friendships, which is just a really special, cool thing to have somebody who's known many versions of you throughout your life.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of what is in the show is really based on the podcast and the amazing friendship between Nikki Boyer and Molly Cochin, and so that was a huge inspiration for us.
Yeah. So you guys had worked together previously on New Girl, but Liz, you were the sole showrunner on that, and then you had that experience also on The Dropout. So why was this more of a double act? Why did it make sense for you guys to tackle this together as co-showrunners?
It's totally practical.
No, I mean, it made it so much more fun, and just having a partner. Even now, even being up here with Kim is great. So, I was in the middle of doing The Dropout, and I knew I couldn't do this right away, and so I emailed Kim, and it was in the middle of COVID, and she was like, "Are you really going to make me listen to a podcast about dying of cancer?" And then
she was like, "But it's also all about sex." And I was like, "Well, I'm only human." Yes, send me the link. I'm a perv, sure. And so she sent it to me, and I listened to it, and I was just sobbing on my floor. It was June 2020. It was a dark time for many reasons.
Feelings were high.
Were high, and I found myself having this emotional release for kind of everything. And I was like, oh, I think this is why we tell stories, or why I want to tell stories, is to reach people and help people access emotion and connect. And so I called Liz back, and I was like, oh my God, yes, I would do anything to work on this with you. So I continue to be very grateful and honored that she asked.
So that's June 2020. The podcast comes out, I guess, February of that. And then here we are 5 years later, and the show is finally real. And there's many delays. Michelle Williams had a baby. There was a strike and a pandemic and all of these other things. And so you had that long gestation process, which is not, I guess sometimes happens with television, but you can't count on it. So how did you guys use that? Do you feel like you managed to make it work to your advantage, even though I'm sure it was really frustrating in the actual process?
I wish I could say I used it really productively.
Well, you made a whole other show in there too, so that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a kind of wonderful to have time to really think about it, and it was also frustrating sometimes because you get excited and you want to go, and then. But I mean, there was something about this show that I kind of deep down just knew it was going to happen at some point. It just was one of those things where I was like, I'm gonna get this story out in the world if it's the last thing I do. So I was pretty determined about it. But yeah, I mean, it was nice to have a second to think. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, when we think about New Girl, and we both spent 6-7 years on network television, and just having to write stuff the night before, and and so it's a really different world now with streaming, you know.
And it was also cool because, like, at some point we were going to have 10 episodes, and then it became 8 episodes, and it was like, it made us really have to, like, give us time to really think about, like, what is essential to this story, because we don't have a lot of time to tell it. And so having that amount of time to keep kind of re-examining it, I think allowed us to make sure we were actually including the pieces that felt really necessary, because there were so many things in the podcast that we, you know, could have explored, or maybe, you know, you always want to do more. But yeah.
I mean, on the granular level of time, like for a limited series to have half-hour episodes, like it's so rare. I didn't even realize it until I hit play on the first episode. I mean, obviously, you know, you guys worked on New Girl, that's a half-hour show, but why did that format make sense for this?
I honestly don't know why they greenlit it. I don't know that it makes any sense.
Might not make any sense
from a financial standpoint.
No one's making any money.
But they can't do it. They can't take it away now. You know,
No, it's on. It's just. It's on. It's
You can
out.
watch it right now.
Yeah, I was surprised too, but at no point did we want to make it an hour, because what I was actually really excited about by the story was that it was a comedy. You know, it was like, if we're going to go to these places, if we're going to go to these dark places, the fact that we're doing it in the framework of a half-hour episode actually helped kind of like get me to a place where I wanted to explore some of those darker places. So it was, I describe it as like, we had like sitcom muscle memory, and we sort of were like attacking these themes, but kind of with the attitude of like, how do we get to the kind of like, how do we find the joy in this? How do we find the kind of absurdity in it? Yeah, so I'm actually really grateful that they kept it at half hour, and I have no idea why.
I think they're grateful too. I think it turned out pretty well. Sorry, Kim, I cut you off.
No, as it goes on, though, you'll see it starts to get it. We allowed it to expand a little bit more, because I think it was like, okay, like the character starts sort of. I mean, the character is expanding. The whole world seems like it's kind of like growing in the show, and it was cool that FX was allowing us to like be a little bit looser with the time as the episodes went on.
I mean, when you hear a show is adapted from a podcast, you're like, oh, okay, so the first episode of the podcast can become the show. And like, I listened to the first episode of the podcast, which is really nothing at all like anything on the show. Like, there's a whole story about a massage that I don't think ever comes up on the show. So you guys had this basic story of this friendship, and obviously, you know, Molly's story has this set ending, but the structure is really, I imagine, a really big challenge of figuring out how to make that work into a actual narrative. And I guess that's not really a question, but how did you guys really break it down, what you had on the podcast? And it seems like really built something totally new.
Yeah, it's sort of deceptive. Like when you sign up to adapt a podcast, it's like, oh, it's already in episodes. Like it's like my work's done for me. And you know,
like this will take us. I was like, if you and I just go away for like a week, we could like bang this out and like turn it in
5 years.
5 years later. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think. The podcast is two women talking about things that have happened after the fact. So we knew that we had to tell the story in real time, because time is such an important part of the story. So we had so many conversations about just like, how are we going to tell Molly's story, which is this very internal, you know, the Michelle Williams character, this kind of internal emotional journey through her own experience while she's having sex, you know, like how do we show that on screen? And one bad idea that we had was like a magic school bus style thing where we were like fully inside of her body. That never really
terrible,
made it.
honestly.
They responded to that.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe this was
Like
a missed opportunity.
Maybe they'll give us one more episode. We could do it. The blood cells look like life rafts. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, so it was a lot of just like bad ideas, lots of back and forth, like how do we do this, and also keep the friendship, like keep that sense of like how much these two women love each other, but still feel like we're moving forward. I think the other big decision we made was she's experienced some sexual trauma in her past, and we decided to not save that till later. Like, we didn't want that to be what everything was building up to, like the reveal of the trauma. We wanted to put it at the beginning and sort of let the show be about her healing from it as opposed to revealing it as the sort of answer for everything. That was a big conversation that we had, and so then we kind of worked from that place.
Oh, and we also we knew that we wanted to really tell the story of a caretaker as well as the story of the person being taken care of. And so we knew that we were gonna, like Liz is saying, really center this story on the love story between these two best friends. And also we would need to really flesh out the character of Nikki, because on the podcast, her role is to ask questions and to react. But we were very interested in who is the person, what's going on in her life while she's taking care of her friend. What is she sacrificing? What is she going through in order to do this? What does that look like? Because I think sadly cancer impacts so many people's lives, but also being a caretaker is something that most people have done at some point and can understand, and we really wanted to depict that experience as well. We thought that would also be really powerful and resonate with audiences.
Well, and part of what you're doing for that is Nikki's got the relationship with her boyfriend, and then you also have Molly's relationship with the neighbor, who's played by Rob Delaney, who you can see in the trailer, who I just fell really deeply in love with. I'm watching this show. Like, I don't know if that was experienced on set, but having,
I don't know how to answer that in an appropriate way, but yes.
We'll talk after. But there's this way where you can say, like, well, they have this friendship, but come on, they have to have like men in their lives, and that's so obviously not how this goes. But that's not an easy thing to do. So how do you guys figure out how to make those love stories part of it, but not the whole thing?
Well, the neighbor was this composite character of a lot of the men that different men that she talks about on the podcast, and we knew that we wanted to build to a real moment of love between them. But what was exciting to me as someone who's written rom-coms and loves rom-coms, and just like, was that this was this love story that didn't go all the way to the end. Like, we knew that we didn't want him to kind of be there at the end, that he was going to take her as far as he could, and then it was going to be over. And that was actually really helpful to know that we needed her to find love with him, the kind of love that she needed, but not like an all-encompassing love. And that felt like a kind of slightly different sort of romantic comedy. And maybe that's why we didn't give him a name. I don't know. Like, we were like, we're not putting everything into this guy. But Rob is incredible in the show, and the chemistry between them is amazing. And I think it's exciting to see he's in the sort of BDSM world that they're in. He's a submissive man, and it's kind of this. It was exciting to kind of show how sexy that could be. And I don't know. I'm excited for people to, my high school teachers to watch it. I did actually. I heard from my high school. The reason I said that is because I heard from my high school math teacher today, and she was like, "I'm glad to see that you used calculus to figure out how big the cock cage should be." And I was like, "What?" And it was I was like, "Oh, thank God for social media." Like, I was like, it's really delivered.
Did you use the calculus yourself?
I didn't, but I must have at some level.
Most people don't know is that Liz built that cock cage in her house, in her lab.
I don't actually remember what calculus is. I don't know
either. But the high school math teacher thinks that you do, and that's what matters.
But there was, what was kind of cool is, in the real Molly story, in terms of what we were adapted, she really, at some point on this journey, confessed to Nikki, I think I actually really want to fall in love, and I want to find that. And sadly, she didn't get that chance. So what felt really cool to us was, in adapting this story and making it, this new version, we could give that to her, and we could have her have that connection with somebody. So that felt really good.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to say about the sex scenes on the show, but I love that you guys went to a WGA class for writing sex scenes, which I did not know existed, and I think is such a brilliant idea. So what was that like?
It was a Valentine's Day Zoom, I think.
Because the
I also think we
WGA
didn't
gets writers. Like, they know that they're going to need to see a sex scene, like a Zoom on Valentine's Day, as opposed to being with other people.
I also feel like we were all like, I mean, I'm not going to go to that. I don't need that. And then we all went, we were like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally here on this Zoom right now. Me too. It was amazing.
I wrote a movie in 2011 that had sex scenes, but that was the last time I had written sex scenes. And because obviously New Girl was network, and then The Dropout, we couldn't, for legal reasons, have sex scenes. So it was I really was like, this is a new world. How do I learn how to do this right? And it was so informative and great. And it basically just said, like, be as specific and clear as you can and use clinical words. And like, your job as the writer is to tell people exactly what's in your head and to not shy away from that. And I don't know, I found it like so useful.
It's like, think about the people who are going to be on set who have to interpret this, and you want them to be safe. You don't want it to be up to them, put them in a position where like they have to figure out like how they want it. Like, you don't want to make anybody like feel like it, like uncomfortable. Like, how to make people feel like they're
Like, they know what the plan
know what
is.
the
Yeah.
parameters are. They know
I
what the
wrote a scene
expectations
for
are.
my husband and emailed it to him. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, you guys are already getting response from the show. It just came out today, but you're kind of seeing that it's hitting a nerve with people. Like, knowing that you didn't know you could get away with this stuff until you actually put it on television. You kind of push a boundary in some way. Not that that's the reason to make the show, but you put this out there. Do you feel like it is opening a door in some way, that there are ways we can push things forward, that like female pleasure could be on television more? What a concept. Like, are you feeling optimistic about that?
Well, like, what was really exciting to us was just, and as we did our research for this show and like reading more, like one of the things we did, we hired this woman, Emily Nagoski, who wrote this amazing book, Come As You Are, and she was sort of a sex research consultant for us. But her book is amazing. One of the things she says is a lot of the number one question she gets asked is, am I normal? And I think for us, that was sort of a guidepost, like in a way of how can we make a show that like kind of explodes that question, because am I normal is something that creates a lot of shame and a lot of, especially for everyone, especially maybe for women and our bodies, like there's already so much shame baked in, but I think for everybody. And so how could we show sex in a way that is not what we're all used to seeing, but is absolutely like sex that is enjoyed and like desired by lots of people? How can we like be expansive in what we're showing? Make people feel like less alone and like braver to be themselves. Because that's what which is taking a cue from what Molly did on the podcast.
Yeah.
She's so inspiring.
I think that to jump on that, which I thought was so beautiful, but the idea that, nothing that you want, if it brings you pleasure, it's worth exploring, and to try to take away the things that you tell yourself about it. And I think that female pleasure is probably pretty scary, at some level to people.
Gotten some notes over the years that suggest that, maybe.
No comment. But I remember I watched this documentary. This film is not yet rated. It was a while ago, but it was talking about just how female pleasure on screen immediately gets you an R rating or an X rating, whereas like violence doesn't. And it's always been interesting to me, and we'll see how this goes. I
mean, something I thought about, and we're got to end, but like in Blue Valentine with Michelle Williams, like very famously had a scene of oral sex that got an X rating, and like now, like the idea of that coming kind of full circle and her being in this show was like, we can make progress. It felt very inspiring in some way.
Yeah, but I will say also, we never went into it trying to push boundaries or shock. Like, it was always, if there's sex in the show, it's because we're learning something about her character and we're learning something about Nikki's character. We always approached it from that place. But
sex is her chosen way of getting to know herself on a deeper level and healing. and so it's always doing something for her. It's never just there to be there.
And sometimes it's very funny, but not in a shaming way.
Well, it was also that was really important to us too, to make sure that we were never, that the desire, it was never the source of the joke. That the joke was never, oh, look what this person likes doing. It was always about the people, but it was never about what they liked or what they wanted.
I mean, that was important to me. It was like, I think, I don't know the kinds of sex everyone's having, but I believe
we could get into it.
Pass the mic out.
Let's get into it. But I feel like, you can be laughing about something while you're having sex, and then it can then turn on a dime and be very hot. And like, I feel like I don't see that a lot on screen, and so it was like kind of fun to sort of say, okay, we're not choosing one or the other. We're not choosing like steamy versus comedy. So we're just trying to kind of keep both alive in those scenes.
Yeah, I love the show. I'm so glad that you guys made it. I'm glad you guys are here. Don't go anywhere. There's a reception in the back to all of you in the audience, so please stick around. And
please
thank you
don't
guys.
tell me about your sex life.
Don't tell Liz about your sex lives, but please come have some snacks. And thank you so much for being here.
So
Thanks,
much.
guys.